All right. With the white pieces, we'll do our best, but obviously with white, the most we can hope for is some type of reversed Taimanov. And with the black pieces, we're playing the Sicilian against e4. So I'll try to keep the setup the same for the most part. Only so much we can do here. Oh, that's a nice move. It's a friendly move. I think we can do this, even though e4 can be played. Should be able to go there. So our setup is going to look something like this. Why b3? Well, I can't go b4, can I? Obviously, if this was a real Sicilian or a real reverse Sicilian, this pawn would be there. And then what would I do? I would play b4. So it's not a perfect replica right now. Go d3. Bishops. He can go e4 here. I'll take and play. Bishop b2, and I think we'll still be getting our pieces out where they need to be. But the only reason we're not playing b4 is like, that pawn's usually here. That would be a reverse type of Sicilian position. Anytime d5 happens, we always take it. So that's a automatic move. Don't need to think twice about it. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, John Galt. If white played a4 against our Sicilian and we had a6, yeah, I might play b6. And bishop b7, that's right. That's right. Okay, I'll take. You won't often have this situation. Oh, interesting. Knight e7. So now I'm thinking of taking. The queen should recapture because otherwise this pawn would be loose. The other thing is knight g5. If I can ever get my hands on the light square bishop, that is a big check mark. We want to do that, definitely. But if you take here, the queen takes. Suddenly queen takes b3 is threatened. So not sure that we can do that. Knight g5. Knight a4. Knight e4, b6. Oh, knight e5, knight g5. Yeah, this I don't like. It's weird to think about these positions because the pawn is usually on c7. So actually, when you're playing the Sicilian position, you're very, very rarely going to have a c-pawn to attack. Usually you're just going to put a knight there, like just drop it there. Knight f6. So if we take rook c8, here gets a little bit dicey. I think this might be a knight g5 position. We want to play this move so that we don't necessarily win a pawn right away, hoping to infuriate Yasser and try to win it later. Because I'll tell you, if I don't win a pawn but I get his bishop, that'll be perfect for me. I prefer that. Knight g5, looking to take the bishop. Queen d6. So I might be able to do both here. So we'll start by taking a pawn and with a tempo as well. I'll take that bishop. And I think it's time to... No. Am I gonna... No, I can't do it. I have to just play it safe. Gasser's got me thinking about taking more pawns when someone smart would just bring the bishop back, play h3, count your blessings. This is gorgeous, gorgeous pawn structure. This one is this is a tricky. I tell you, that move really caught me by surprise there. Rook d7. Boy, I didn't see that one. Now, oh. He was fast too, wasn't he? Had some good speed. In terms of our setup, you know, it's unusual that this pawn is here in a reverse Sicilian, let's say. Should be there. But we still got a good look at, you know, d5. We always take it. Pieces pretty much go like this. Castle. And, okay, there was already some targets here. But knight e4 is a natural move. Next one. All right, e4. Here we go. And hopefully you guys remembered, this is the most popular move under 1000. We start with e6, which is the first step in our Taimanov, always. And specifically against this bishop move, instead of bringing the knight out, always go with the pawns. Start with the pawns first. Because I want to be able to get b5, gain some space there. Bishop can come out to great diagonal, knight c6. You guys know the drill. We can't quite go c4 because of d3, covering it. If he ever plays d4 though, we're right there waiting for the move c4. We're gonna go for these kind of moves here. Knight f6, bishop e7, queen c7. This is an easy move to play against that. h4. Now I got a question for him. If I attack, is he just gonna leave it there? What's going on here? Are you gonna launch an attack with my rook on the open file? Okay, takes. We should always be very excited to gain the bishop pair for any reason in this opening. But certainly here. Let's castle. So we have the bishop pair. I think a great start so far. d4. So, to be quite honest with you, he's a little bit late. He is a little bit late on the d4 move. Not only should that have been played way earlier in the game, probably instead of the bishop c4 stuff, but it's also a free pawn, completely free. I've got so many pieces attacking. I'm going to start by taking with the knight. My next move, maybe taking with the pawn. I'm just going to think for a sec. Like this looks great, but if we take with the pawn, knight here, we also get this pawn. We lose d4. Trying to decide what's worth it there. Because bishop takes is also just so strong. So strong. Alright. I'm gonna go here because it opens things up more. Even though knight e2 wins this pawn, there's a beautiful, beautiful open diagonal there that we're gonna try our best to utilize. c3 is needed here. Probably gonna go rook e8. I'm actually a little slightly conscious of the fact that could be sacrificed there. Drop our bishop back. Slide this rook over somewhere and either go for this plan or perhaps bishop takes and he goes for it now. Maybe a little hasty. But this is why I wanted my rook here. So I'll bring my king to the corner. What am I threatening? Queen c6, and this is the... You get a lot of wins in the Taimanov just based off of this diagonal. So good idea. Unfortunately, we can throw this move in and force the queen away. That will give me the bishop. Now, again, all I really want to do is bring it back, play queen c6, and win on the diagonal once again. So I'm hoping that's going to be enough. There it is. These pieces coordinate so well. That's why when the Taimanov is played like the main line, where the knight comes and takes d4 on the Sicilian, I always say, leave your queen on c7, let them take your knight and take back with your queen. That sets your diagonal up already, which is kind of nice. Okay, e4 time for the Sicilian. Are we going to see Smith Mora? Most people take the pawn, honestly. And it works out really well for us because knight c6, I mean, part of our Taimanov, right? Perfect. So this should be very familiar. The only difference between this position and the main line is the knight would already be there. All right, let's take the opportunity to gain time and get our bishop where it wants to go, right? Okay. So this would be the normal way to develop here. Because my opponent is being a little bit slow, I think I'm gonna take advantage of that and put my bishop to a slightly more useful square. When I see this, this, and this, I know bad things are gonna happen to good people. I can already feel it. H5, H4 takes, queen takes. So that's what we want. But you have to think about what our opponent's intending here. He's gonna put the bishop on f4. How many times have we seen that? It's been everywhere in this opening. I don't know what it is, but people have a real issue with my queen on c7. They see it there and they just get bothered. d6, maybe queen here as well. I'll go d6 for now. Rook there. Okay, I'm seeing knight g4 stuff. Right? And also the e5 square is under my control. So a move like knight d5, kind of typical for the opening. The knight can drop to a few different squares here. Well, I mean, I wish I had a better explanation for why the Taimanov is so strong, but for the most part, I just sit here and and stuff just hangs. It's always entertaining to do stuff like this because people watching always think to themselves, oh, where'd you find these 800s? Oh, these aren't my opponents when I'm in the pool. Oh man, I would beat these guys. No, you wouldn't. If you're 800 and you're watching this, you do the same shit. I promise you. You do the same shit. You don't think you do, but you do. You are this 800. You are this person. Ouch. Ouch. Okay, let's go c4 with the white pieces. e3, you know, we'll keep our, you know, dreams alive, but ultimately, when people do this and play d5, kind of have to adjust. That move we like to see, though. Remember, against the c5 thing, we can't really play a3, b4, so I'm just putting the pawn on b3 for now. Ooh. I'm seeing good stuff over here. As soon as the knight shows up here, by the way, I'm probably going to consider a3. e5. I am thirsty for an attack on the other side of the board here. So thirsty. So, because I don't see this bishop joining anytime soon, I am going to put my bishop here. When the knight shows up here, I'm going to immediately play a3 because knight b4 is going to knock my socks off. So knight c6, a3 is like magnetic move. I'm like ready to do it. He can't play this right now. I'm probably going to put my own pieces on that square. Knight g5 to cover it. I know it looks a little funny, but I'm ready for h5. I'm ready to sack. Ready for knight g5. This is going to be a fairly substantial attack. Okay, we like to see this. Now the knight can get in, and you can see kind of the bad things that might happen to good people here. Right? Queen e8, all of a sudden, takes. Knight f6. Queen e6 makes the most sense. Okay. Queen e6, there's other things to worry about. All right. I think we're going to take here. Gotta get the sacrifice in. The only other thing to do is here. Queen g4 and rook takes h5. So I'm definitely thinking of that. Rook takes, bishop h7. King moves up somewhere. It looks like bishop f5, knight e5 is good. I think I might end up going for this. This is like maybe not going to lead to checkmate, but I think it's the better move. The queen now has to go here. It's the only square left. You see how literally all my pieces are working here towards the same goal. King side, right? And queen g4 is a good looking move. But rook takes h5 defends my knight, and knight f6. No matter where your queen ends up, here or here, is going to win material. Let's take here. Check as well. Okay, king h8. Interesting, interesting. Well, I think should be able to pretty much sacrifice our way to victory here. Takes and takes. Bishop e4 would be another reasonable move. But I think we need to rip the cover off the king. Oh, he's just not interested in he's not interested in taking my pieces, it seems. Like, at all. It's a weird feeling. Knight h6 check. I mean, this guy is hanging as well. I have been playing this whole game in the hopes that he will take one of my pieces. One of them. I think he took the rook on h5, and it's been downhill ever since. So he's like, you know what? I'm not touching another piece. I've seen what happens. Knight b4. All right, well, we'll take here. That's a check. And surprisingly in this position, and it is surprising, you know, the pieces are all involved to bring you this gorgeous checkmate. And I said all of them involved, and you might be saying, wait a minute, the queen guards this, the knight guards that, the bishop's doing that, but the knight's not doing anything. You're right. Sorry, I forgot. There you go. Ouch. Very informative game. Well, might be sarcasm, and your sarcasm would be appreciated because, you know, a lot of these games are just full blunders, but truly, if people are not taking the center at all, the way that the pieces get set up in the Taimanov lends itself really nicely to an H-pawn push. Because the diagonals are so disgusting when you get all your pieces on there. The knight g5. Because knight g5, even though you're going for an attack, when h6 happens and you need to bail out, you can always come back to e4 in the center. It's a nice feeling. So you kind of go on the attack maybe with these moves, but if you need to undo the attack, then coming back in the center is just fine. And in case anyone's wondering, h4 is the best move in this position by a very clear margin. h4, h5. So h4 is not like, oh, I'm playing against the 700. I'm just going to go for something like brilliancy prize. No, h4 is actually the best move, and it's a very thematic idea in the Taimanov. So the Taimanov has a nice vibe to it because you can play it ultra aggressive if your opponent's kind of misplacing his pieces and wasting too many moves with pawns, etc. You can play this, and it won't be... You're not going to be accused of playing salty clown chess. Is g6 a big mistake by black? Yes. Huge mistake. That bishop needs to be there if the pawn is on g6. My bishop is looking pretty nasty on this diagonal. Oh, that's nice. We got e4. Perfect time to play the Taimanov. e6. d4. All right, so far so good. We're playing the main line. Now, I know we play a6 when people play bishop c4. We go e6, a6. But when people play the main line, take with the knight, we start with the knight. And we're always ready to take this way with the pawn. Not he takes, for the most part. Okay, c4. c4. Let's see here. So c4, we probably want to go for things like knight f6 and get the pieces out. So let's start with knight f6, attack the center pawn. c4 is the only one that I would say you play a little bit differently than some of the main lines. Any other moves, you almost always go for the same thing. Queen here, a6, b5, bishop b7. But this one kind of prevents the move b5. And no, don't tell me he's disconnected. Hang on a sec. We finally got the Taimanov. We finally got a main line. You tell me Buddy's not even here? Oh, he returned with 1 second. 1 second. He's staying in this game for us. John Dollar. He's not going anywhere. Attaboy, John. Do it for the stream. He's a fighter. Knight here. All right, I'm bringing the bishop out. Bishop c5. Let's hit that knight. Bishop e3. Guess what? I got a trick for you guys. Queen b6. And I promise you, after queen b6, black is going to find a way to be better in every single line here. I know it's surprising. There's a lot of things. Knight a4, but we would have a check to throw in. Knight c6, take the bishop first. No matter what, black has an advantage there. And it happens really quickly. Here, I mean, he's just not even defending the knight. So now we just take it. I'll show you guys some of the variations afterwards, after the game, but I would go so far as to call what I just did an opening trap. And John Dollar, he barely had the internet connection to stay in this, but he fought through, and with 1 second left before it would auto-resign, He stayed in so we could see this opening trap work. And now he's disconnected. But shout out to John Dollar, a real one. He wanted to make sure the people had something they could learn, something they could take away from this game. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about here. So, yeah, c4, it's a fine move. Knight f6, hitting the pawn. First of all, if the knight takes here, I've said a few times, we are not interested in playing moves like this and allowing this queen exchange. It may have to happen in some lines, but whenever we'll need to do it, or it's the best move, I'll always tell you. And that may occur shortly. But for the most part, pawn takes. And if e5 to hit your knight, smack him in the face with queen a5. Okay, so knight f6. So we attack the pawn. Of course, he defends it, right? Knight c3. Okay, now we play bishop c5. And now, after knight takes on c6, here is an actual important moment where you will need to play d takes c6. I know it's surprising, but here if you take this way, after e5, there's no queen a5. Our knight can't move into the center. This is trash. Our knight's gonna have to go here. Very, very yucky. So we do actually want to play d takes. And so after takes and takes, a lot of people are probably gonna still play e5, but we're not scared this time because we have knight g4 hitting these two pawns. Already, thumbs up for us. Knight e4, we can throw in bishop b4 check, and then take this pawn next. We will be up a pawn. If white defends this pawn and defends the other pawn, we go knight here. The rook only has one square, and then knight d3 check. Even though it loses the knight, wins the rook. So once again, we have a bit of an advantage there. And if they don't play e5, and instead they play another move like, for example, bishop here, intending to castle, one of my favorite moves as part of this line is e5. Remember this one. If they castle, our king needs a square. Do not choose that one. Choose this one, and after bishop takes e5, we can still uncork the exact same idea, knight to g4. We'll be taking on f2. The other thing that you can do if you want to just take f2 is you can do it now. I think if you really want to play for a win, you do that. Otherwise, knight g4. And these lines can get a little bit weird. But funny enough, after this, let's say that you wanted to make a draw. You've already got one. Positions where you have at least a draw are never going to be bad. And it could only get better than that, because if you take f2, then I assume you'll beat most of your opponents from these sorts of positions. And if they take right away, bishop takes f2. You win this bishop. e5 is a sneaky little move. Big fan. Works a lot of the time. Most people develop their bishop there. Of course, they can make a move like this. But remember, your next plan, regardless, and I say regardless because even if bishop here, we still play e5. If bishop here, play e5. Your setup is to play e5, king e7, bishop e6, maybe h6, rook d8, maybe a5, bishop b4, etc., etc. That's your setup. You want this and you want this. When he goes in castles, always put your king here. And you'll notice that this knight is dominated by the pawn. The bishop is trash because of the c pawn. Good position for us. Yes. So that's what we do on knight c6. But a lot of people, almost everyone, will play bishop e3. And I got news for you. After bishop e3, black already holds an advantage. Queen b6 I played. Okay, let's look at some of the obvious moves. Knight takes c6, bishop e3. You're threatening this pawn, and you're threatening the knight, and there's not really any meaningful threats that the knight can make. So after takes, you can just take, and you've got this next turn. You're fine to trade queens. Crushing position. The knight's also under attack, mind you. If white moves the knight away, just trade the bishops, and the b2 pawn will be hanging. Very simple. Nice and easy. So the last and probably the only like super tricky move I guess maybe there's 2 more moves I'll show you. But knight a4 makes the most sense because it hits these 2 pieces and defends b2, right? And the simple answer to something like this is, well, if you hit them with a check, bishop b4, white has an awkward time responding to this. If knight c3, then you're already winning the e-pawn. I know this looks scary, but takes, you just take back with the queen. And meanwhile, you have some serious threats here. Bishop d2 is just going to drop the knight. And yes, your opponent can play king e2, but I'm not going to discuss much more there. If they're playing king e2, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it. Already a good sign. So that's knight a4. Just throw in a check, and either they'll have to bring the knight back, they'll hang a piece, or they'll move their king. All good things for us. White can also play the knight to b5. Might look stupid. Takes, takes, takes. But the reason it's still okay is because there's a few threats here. But we take with a check. Say you block, and we can castle here. And we're doing just fine. You may be curious about knight d6 check before taking back. King e7. Anytime they take, I mean, yeah, just take it back, no worries. At some point, they're going to have to recapture. But this knight is not going to stay there forever. Like, that's not how it works. That's not a safe square for the knight. If we just go and attack it, it has to move. And if you take the bishop, I'll take back. Either rook, honestly. And maybe tuck my king back in on f8 and g8. So, yes, it's a lot to think about, but it's also good to know that after this you are better, and it's just about remembering the moves that need to be played. With the pawn on c4, you still go for a6, b5? No, zooted. If we were listening, the whole reason I'm even mentioning any of this is because I said specifically at the start that once they play c4, it's one of the only lines where we can't just go into the main basic stuff that we've been talking about the entire series, which is why we're going to start with knight f6, which is unusual. Because if you remember what we've been doing so far, we've always been moving the pawn, always been moving the queen, always been playing b5, always been playing bishop b7. In this one, we start with the knight. Unusual. Bishop c5, also unusual. Right? If the knight takes, d takes c6, also unusual. So I'm spending a little bit of time here because I just want to reinforce a few unusual decisions compared to the rather systematic approach that we've had so far. And this is just one of the very few cases where you need to make this move or you need to do these things. So that's why I'm mentioning them. All right. Well, that was really easy to remember. I'm sure everyone's got that right up here now. Don't need to review that again ever. You guys are good, right? That's c4. Nice and easy. All right, let's go c4. It looks like we might get an e5. Nice. Okay, e4, very, very forward. So we're gonna go with our first couple moves. b4, bishop b2 as well. We're threatening this. Bishop c5 does not seem, and we could take this, but I'm gonna hit him with b4 first. You know, chance we could win a piece here already. We're already gonna win a pawn. Good things, good things. I'll take that. Yes, please. Yes, please. You know where the pieces want to go. Bishop d3 is possible, but I don't, like, it looks good, but there's also f5 or g6 that can be played, so not in a specific rush. Let's bring our queen back to the normal square. Most of the time in the Taimanov, when the bishops get traded, you want your queen to replace the bishop. It actually, your queen is such a great piece from b2. Very underrated. Okay. Let's continue to put our pieces on those normal squares. Right here. I'll go ahead and take more of the center. You want to trade? That's fine with me. You don't want to trade? It's also fine with me. So we're ahead of pawn. I'm gonna improve my bishop a little bit. I like this move from my opponent. Queen f6. Big fan of this move. Can't really go there, but bishop h3, surprisingly, actually an idea here. Bishop takes h3, takes, and queen takes f3. So, impressed. Color me impressed. I'm gonna defend the knight. To get ahead of that, bishop f5, I suppose. We're not really going to say no to a trade, especially with our extra material. Bring a rook to d1. Maybe push. Another trade, again with our extra material. We're not really gonna say no. Okay, so we're thinking of maybe starting to invade on the other side of the board. Yes, the pieces are coming over here, but I'm taking pawns. That's what I'm doing. So queen back to f3 defends everything. Moving the king also does, but I think queen f3 is most solid. Rook f6, queen g3, or queen e2, but any kind of queen trade we'd be a big fan of. Now I think I'm gonna go e4. I'm just looking to trade, looking to open things up. e5. My opponent still might have some back rank issues here. And so that might be a very nice move. Let's attack the queen. That queen is gonna have to go back. I don't think you can stay out here. Really solid game so far. Let's double up the rooks. We're ahead 2 pawns here. We want trades. But we want a pawn really early in this game because our opponent just overextended, like pushed the e pawn a little bit too far. Okay, let's make space for our. No, are we really gonna do this? Takes. Always ready to trade, but okay. e5. Because we're always ready to trade, we're gonna do this, and the queen actually covers the only place my opponent could check my king. It's really on this diagonal because this and this are covered. So I'm basically going to have this queen cover my king and then push the pawn all the way. This stays on that diagonal and helps me make another queen. Check. Bring my queen back. And either this or queen g4. Kind of like queen g4. Offers a trade. Let's use this one. GG Kotka. Such a nice game. Such a strangely subpar, like, first 4 moves from him. 4 or 5 moves. And then just, like, nothing but bangers. Like, ever since, like, these moves were questionable. e4, little aggressive. And then again, this is like the low elo move against our Taimanov, right? People love to bring that bishop out. So e4 was not good, and bishop here was not good. But apart from that, like, pretty much from here, I thought Buddy was just a killer. Played super well. Yes, traded pieces, but like not a single significant blunder from here on out. But yeah, as far as the opening, e4 is a little bit much. Yeah, at this point, the only way to keep the pawn would be to play queen here, right? But, you know, we can maybe bring our knight to go capture it. We can just continue with our setup. At some point, we can play d3 happily and trade it. So, not too concerned with something like this. But if we have a knight on f3 and our opponent can safely play e4 and we can't go to the center, that's usually an issue. So when you have your knight here, you want to keep in mind, can my opponent play e4? If they play e4 and you play knight g5 and you win the pawn, that'll save you. But if you can't go knight g5 and win the pawn, you can't go to the center and you have to go backwards, really bad sign, means you probably messed up. So then you'd want to put your pawn on d3 to stop the pawn getting there. But as early as he did it, way too much. It's usually the case that when things are on your opponent's side of the board, like his pawn, they're easier for me to attack than for him to defend. Not always the case, but usually. Because my pieces simply are closer to the pawn. They don't have as far to travel. c5. We're back in our Sicilian here. e6. Hopefully these moves are familiar. Every time you see d4, snap it off. And knight c6. So, we're still in the main line here. And one thing I think people are tempted by is a6 because it stops the knights from going here. But even though that's true, we still start with the queen to c7. And if somebody does play a knight move there, bring your queen back to b8, and very next move, boot the knight out with a6. It'll be okay. You will survive. However, once you put your queen to c7, almost no matter what your opponent does, truly, your very next move should be a6, because now you do need to take control of that. Bishop f4. When people play bishop f4, at this point, simply because he's kind of rushed it, I would say e5 is very, very tempting. Because even if he plays knight d5, you know, we can move our queen, and he's going to lose some piece. So after this, knight takes c6 is kind of required. We're forking here. And positions when you play e5 are the ones where, when they capture, I would give more consideration to d takes. These are the main positions where you play d takes are ones where you play d5. These moves synergize really well together. Because you play this, and you give up control of d5, and it's like, wait, this looks kind of bad. But then you take here, and you get back control over d5, and it's like, wait, this is kind of good. Knight f6, moves like this. Also looking at b5 here. Not sure we need to play it right away. Just bring the knight out for a sec. Let's move like that. Maybe we could grab there. Let's gain a little bit of space. And it's not necessarily because I want to put my bishop there, but I just don't really want to deal with knight a4. e2. Let's go for our modest development. We still, you know, bishop g4 is not necessarily winning something. Just don't get the wrong idea. Bishop e6. Happy with the pieces. Knight can't go there. f4 looks natural, but then it runs into bishop g4. And that move is really going to get my attention because I just see weaknesses, right? Dark square weaknesses. Bishop to b4. And it's amazing how just one pawn move and suddenly you're like struggling to keep it together here. So we need to see this by him. It's really the only way to to continue playing here. And it does keep things together for the moment. Even if I check him here and he has to move away, I'm also moving one of my pieces away from the knight. This move, not going to get it done. And unfortunately, it's probably going to walk into mate in the next 2 moves. B3, just one move, really. It hurt. Big time. Dark squares are nasty weak after that. So again, start with the queen. Even if they hit you with bishop f4, e5. So remember this line for sure. And knight d5 looks scary, but as long as you put your queen back somewhere safe, let's say here, right? Defend e5. Knight takes c6. Don't panic. Take it back. At this point, I would maybe say open up the queen. But you got 2 pieces hanging here. So you're just winning. You're just winning. So knight d5 is not that scary. It looks scary, but wouldn't worry about it. Takes here, bishop there, and yeah, pieces pretty much get developed like that. Long castle. You know, b4 might threaten the pawn at some point. Knight g4 might win the bishop at some point. And after this, I think the position is teetering on lost. I would say most likely after king here, I'm probably looking at knight g4 as a strong move, because I know that, well, first of all, bishop here doesn't make any sense. Like, I can attack it. I can also play knight takes f2 because the knight's hanging. I would probably want to get rid of the dark square bishop, and my opponent's basically paralyzed here, like can't move a single thing. So I'd want to like take here, castle, maybe play c5, c4, or just castle and play rook d8. Like, I just view this as like a permanent pin situation. It looks pretty gross. I just don't see what white can do. It's like completely stuck. So I'd probably take the dark square bishop off his hands, and then the dark squares around the king would be even more dangerous. Because if I don't take the dark square bishop, I feel like white's going to go queen here, bishop d2, knight b1, and unpin. And whether or not that works is a different story, but I would probably take that so that there's no way to untangle here. And the other plan that looks really nasty is just c5, c4, because if you open up a c-file, that's another way to just win the knight. Okay, we're up against Roid Monster. Nice, we've got a Sicilian here. If d4, we're ready to take, but as we know, when the bishop goes to c4, a6, right? We want to have this b5 move, and we don't want to have bishop b5. And why do we start with the pawns like this? Because it's so common for people to lose and trap their bishop. And I mean, Buddy's resigning after 5 moves. Like, I mean, people got to stop playing. I have no sympathy, by the way, for people that play bishop c4. It's like, but he's playing a GM. It's like, he should know better. You don't play this trash. Bishop c4 against the Sicilian, no sympathy. I couldn't explain rationally why people do it so much, but it's like they learn what to do against e4, e5. Bishop goes here, knight goes here, and they just autopilot in every single opening in chess for the rest of their life. It's like that's all they do. And the nice thing and the really exciting thing about the Sicilian that I'm teaching you here is that it is the best possible Sicilian to handle this bishop c4 move. And guess what? Everyone plays bishop c4. So if you play a different Sicilian, let's say you play the dragon, or you want d6 for the Najdorf, bishop c4, sorry to say, it's not going to be amazing, but it's going to work a lot better against those Sicilians. It's going to be playable. Bishop c4 against our Sicilian is nearly unplayable, and often you just win a piece right off the bat. Even if he doesn't lose a piece and he goes like this, the bishop is just staring at this pawn chain. Is a really bad piece. So, all right, we got the white pieces c4. We're going to keep the setup here. So he's got his setup, you know, little King's Indian, right? Okay, but we've got our setup. This should look very familiar to you. That doesn't seem to bother me just yet. This castle. Oh, he's got the speed here. H3, A5. All right, I think I am gonna take this. You know, bring a rook to the open file. Never hurt nobody. I have some juicy light squares that I'm gonna look to penetrate here. I see these pawns, which means a great thing for me to do would probably be to trade light square bishops. All right, let's take here. We know that we want to do this, right? Anytime that we're playing this opening, like that's truly an automatic. Let's keep pieces on the board here. I got knight d6. A lot of pawns that are loose that I can start attacking. Knight goes back to f6. Maybe not the worst move. Knight d6 here. We also have knight takes f6, but I like this one a little bit more. Knight for bishop would be the best possible trade, and okay, we'll achieve it here as well. Best possible trade. All these dark square pawns, light square bishop should run the board here. Queen. And win the game. I said the light square bishop should run the board. As soon as he gave away his light square bishop, he moved his queen to a light square and lost the game to my light square bishop. Timing.